And like I said, Gamboa, just unbelievable speed, movement, and you could say he's really come together, found himself as a professional, as it's shown today.
Welcome back to Quick Hits here on BLTV Extra.
But the man's in trouble. I'm going to show you how great I am.
On this series, we dig through our personal archive to briefly recap a fighter's career of note.
Buster Douglas is the new heavyweight champion of the world!
On today's video, we turn the clock back 10 or so years and revisit the rise of one of Cuba's finest ever champions. A man with such freakishly fast hands and feet that comparisons were quickly made to the likes of Manny Pacquiao and Prince Nassim Ahmed.
I'm responding to the hype around him, which is extraordinary.
If you enjoy our Quick Hit series, a thumbs up is always appreciated. Here now, BLTV presents The Rise of the Cyclone from Guantanamo, aka Yuriorkis Gamboa. The struggle for a Cuban boxer far surpasses the average setbacks other aspiring pros will encounter across the globe. Behind baseball, boxing is the second most popular sport in the nation. It's profoundly funded and has an array of world-class gyms to perfect the craft. The only real problem, of course, is as a profession, it's banned.
Castro took everything?
He was wealthy. Yeah, he had money. Castro took all the property and all the cash out of the bank. You know, they were communists, so I guess that was basically...
They had to shut it down.
Yeah.
The law dates back to 1912, where the government prohibited the sport due to a fear of rise in street violence. And although the law has been tweaked over the years, Cuba as a nation hasn't hosted a single professional boxing event since 1962.
Que él parece que se olvidó que Cuba antes de 1961 tenía boxeo profesional y teníamos buenos boxeadores también profesionales.
Another good fight this. Oh, what a left hand there! That was a beautiful shot. It really.
Since their exodus from the pro game, Cuba has dominated the amateur boxing circuit. Their rhythmic, stylistic, and eloquent boxing style has been a crucial factor in their success with the head guards on.
I've seen a lot of fighters beaten before they get into the ring against the Cubans, knowing that they're up against the best boxer in the world.
With each passing Olympic Games, a new star is born. Teofilo Stevenson, Felix Savon, and Guillermo Rigondeaux are a few greats among many others, yet the most athletically gifted and promising young talent arose as recently as the early 2000s.
左から右、下から上へのコンビネーションを見せましたキューバのガンボア。12ポイント差。そしてコーナーに見せます。この後のディフェンスも非常にうまいガンボアです。連打。
Yuriorkis Gamboa, still a teenager at this point, had already established himself as the brightest prospect in Cuba, dazzling opponents with his swift footwork and blistering hand speed to win consecutive national championships.
23, the winner in the red corner from Cuba.
In 2004, Gamboa won the flyweight gold at the Athens Olympic Games, becoming a national treasure in the process. Nevertheless, amateur boxing fame rarely correlates to wealth. Gamboa barely had a peso to his name, so he, along with fellow teammates Jan Bartolome and Adlanier Solis, devised a plan to sneak out of training camp while on an international tour to defect the country and take up professional boxing abroad. Before Yuriorkis left, he sold his Olympic gold medal to support his family financially. It was a difficult decision to make considering it was his reward for the greatest achievement of his career. But this was a man that was confident in his ability to make it to the top of the sport, and with it, provide for his family for generations to come. After 3 months of essentially hiding to escape capture, Gamboa and his teammates followed in the footsteps of many other Cuban defects and made their way to Miami, Florida to resume full-time boxing training. After a few months of training, Gamboa relocated to Germany and signed his first professional contract with a European promoter.
Gamboa is a guy who this crowd has been waiting to see.
Der weiß gar nicht, wo die Schläge herkommen. Da stimmt alles. Die Bewegungsabläufe.
The German fans were quick to embrace the Cuban as one of their own, as he put on consecutive praiseworthy performances around the country. The only downside was gaping holes in Gamboa's game technically, where more often than not, he fought with his hands down, pot-shotting and showboating, the sort of style that can either make or break a fighter depending on their ability to avoid punches by slipping, or being able to shrug off a solid blow once their opponents connect.
Simply that there are certain fundamental flaws that he shares with Hamed.
It didn't take long for Gamboa to eventually return to the States and began fighting on ESPN's Friday Night Fights.
Tagging him with shots to the head. Hands are down. He's full of offense now. He's in fiery mode here.
Yuriorkis, as dazzling as many of his previous performances were, still displayed the same constant holes in his game defensively. In an attempt to fix those errors, the Gamboa team brought in the world-renowned Cuban coach Ismael Salas, figuring his defensive techniques could rub off on the young Cuban sooner rather than later.
Said you're going to see something different?
Where he said, well, I took the fight on quick notice too, you know. Hey, he got time to prepare physically for this. Oh! Figure did not.
Wow! Gamboa! Huge right hand!
Well, one thing that's for sure, Gamboa's powers seemed to be improving, yet over the next few fights we saw little development in his defensive game. To be honest, his imperfections made him more exciting to watch.
So you will remain an aggressive fighter.
Pienso que las veces que yo he dado, si la gente se siente en el efecto, no puede continuar.
Obviously, when I hit and they pop and I hurt them, they can't continue. And that's a knockout.
It makes for very exciting fights.
Cuban boxers are often branded as boring by the fans for their safety-first point-scoring style, yet Gamboa was the complete opposite.
Goes down. Yeah, I think Gamboa got his pride wounded. They are trading big time.
Hands down, pot-shotting, back-and-forth exchanges probably more comparable to a Mexican fighter.
Starts to wobble, and Gamboa is making constant contact here.
By 2010, Gamboa became a two-weight world champion with less than 20 pro fights to his name, a remarkable feat very few boxers in history have achieved.
And a sensational performance from Gamboa.
Too sharp, too quick, too powerful.
While most of the boxing world was still sleeping on Gamboa's talent, the pound-for-pound king Floyd Mayweather Jr. was one of the first fighters to come forward and sing his praises publicly. In 2011, Gamboa started training at Mayweather's gym in Las Vegas, where they soon forged a unique bond that looked likely to end up with a promotional deal being tied between the two. Sadly, before things were finalized, Floyd was sent to jail for 3 months over a domestic violence dispute, and his so-called friend, Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent, stepped up in an attempt to take care of Floyd's promotional business while he was locked up. And by take care of, we mean to steal his most valuable asset in Gamboa by signing him to his own newly founded promotional company, SMS Promotions, unbeknownst to Floyd, who sat in a cell.
Like, I didn't come to you saying I'm gonna be a boxing promoter, I want to be in the boxing, I want to do this and do that. Like, I'm around it, and I do enjoy it. I love it from before I even met Floyd.
The whole 50 versus Floyd drama that dominated much of the hip-hop and boxing news back then was really of no interest or concern to me. At the time, I just remember thinking, what's going to happen to Gamboa? At this time, Gamboa was rising up the pound-for-pound list and truly establishing himself as the face of the lower weights in boxing. And this wasn't an untested hype job. Multiple championship-level fighters, including Jorge Solis, Orlando Salido, and Hammerfist Varenas, had all felt the full force of Gamboa's startling skill set. With the odd knockdown aside, his 23 opponents so far were all beaten to a pulp inside the distance. As most people apprehended, 50 Cent's interest in boxing quickly dwindled, and Gamboa, along with the other fighters 50 signed, were all struggling to get fights signed within the first year of their new contract. Gamboa went from fighting an average of 4 times a year to maybe 1 if he was lucky.
So the bell sounds, the fight comes to a finish, the crowd lets out a small torrent of boos.
The inactivity hurt not only Gamboa's performances due to ring rust, but his stature in the scene overall, and by the end of 2013, he'd already become a what-if story. Amid all the promotional negativity, 2014 presented Gamboa with one last chance to regain his position and respect in the sport. Terence Crawford, the newly crowned WBO lightweight champ, was essentially in the same position Gamboa was 5 or so years prior. Only, the talk among avid boxing fans suggested this was more than just a promising prospect. His punching power with either hand, defensive prowess, and ability to switch stances effortlessly made a case for him being the most complete young fighter in the world, perhaps even the successor to Floyd and Manny. Still, before Crawford could reap all the praise, he had to overcome a hungry and dedicated Gamboa.
The winner of this fight will be the undisputed star of the lightweight division.
I almost equated it to,
and he's the man who works with Crawford in the gym.
a great fight like I expected it to be.
But Gamboa has the kind of speed that upsets your expectations.
Like that. 1-2 with the right hand landing over the top.
While the size difference was apparent, so was the vast gap in hand speed and experience. Gamboa breezed through the opening rounds, catching the slightly cold-looking Crawford with constant eye-catching combinations.
And Gamboa lands a left hook and a right hand.
He might have saw something bad.
Well, but Crawford landed a little left hand.
Like that. Bad thing about this is when like that. A fighter's
blocked by a right hand. Terrence Crawford has fallen 4 rounds behind at home in Omaha. Would have to win 6 of the last 8 just to get a draw.
With 4 rounds secured in the bank, Gamboa stepped up the aggression looking for the KO in the 5th. Yet, once again, his overeagerness got the better of him, and Crawford sent him crashing to the canvas.
Good shot! Hard counter shot by Terrence Crawford. Down goes Gamboa. Tremendous right-hand shot as Gamboa was coming in.
That was it for Gamboa. Game plan was out the window. The calculated point-scoring flurries turned into desperate swings in an attempt to regain control. And while it made for sensational Fight of the Year type viewing, Crawford's composure and timing eventually became the deciding factor.
There goes the shot, and down goes Gamboa.
To the headshots as the body shot.
This fight went from
exchange. Tremendous exchange. Gamboa almost went down again.
This fight went from Crawford getting outclassed to Gamboa getting beaten up. Crawford throwing home run shots, bringing them up from the floor, and Gamboa coming forward.
Down goes Gamboa, and that'll do it.
That was a great fight. A great fight.
Watching this back gave me an elevated level of respect for both fighters. Crawford displayed all those great attributes I listed earlier, yet ticked off even more boxes by demonstrating a deep level of composure in a fight he was losing convincingly. Gamboa, on the other hand, lost his rag after the first knockdown, but earned the opposing crowd's respect for his bravery and determination. With no referee to step in and close the show, there's no doubt Yuriorkis would have kept getting up all night long.
You were having your way early. What were you doing early on that changed later in the fight?
Bueno, creo que fue un buen combate. Éramos dos guerreros que estábamos arriba del ring, tratando de tener la victoria, y la logró él.
You know, we were just 2 warriors in the ring trying to get the victory, and he won.
And that's where the story ended. At least the freight train one that I will remember Gamboa for. Boxing is a harsh sport that can make or break a fighter overnight. He fought excellently against Crawford, and an organization like the UFC, for example, would have rewarded such an effort with lucrative fights off the bat. Yet in this case, Yuriorkis wasn't presented another title shot for 5+ years, and by that time he was 38 and well past his athletic prime.
To prepare physically for this, Sega did not. Wow!
I covered this story today not just because I enjoy shedding light on some slightly lesser-known fighters, but more so for Gamboa's uniqueness as an aggressive Cuban fighter. Not many, if any, boxers from Cuba have ever fought in such an entertaining manner. He didn't quite reach the expectations from pundits like Max Kellerman and Roy Jones Jr., but he did everything in his power to provide for his family by being the best and most entertaining fighter he possibly could. That gets my seal of approval, and I hope you guys enjoyed some of these clips as much as I took pleasure in putting them together. There is more to boxing than Tyson and Mayweather. Thousands of pugilists have exciting and unique stories, and if you enjoyed this one, be sure to subscribe as we've got plans to cover many more like this down the line. Until next time, fight fans, this is BLTV Extra, signing off.